Hello, friends. I'm Su. Um, Again, it's been a while that I haven't made any videos. Um, that's because I enjoyed my life so much. Um, Here's the problem. Um, if you're so bored and if you're depressed, like when I was in the Netherlands, I actually tried to make a lot of videos because I had nothing else to do. And I feel so suppressed and depressed that I need to find a way to express myself. That's why I kept making videos. Um, but when I'm back in China, well, I have many things to do, a lot of activities, enjoy life so much. Um, I somehow become lazy. I become too lazy to make videos. So here's the dilemma. There's an ancient Chinese article, 黄生借书说. It tells a story of a person um, when he was poor and humble. Um, he doesn't have money, he doesn't have anything. He likes to read a lot of books, and he doesn't have any books. He has to borrow books from rich Chinese friends. And he really read many books. And one day, he participated in national exam and get a position and become an official in the government. And he get a lot of books, but somehow he didn't read books anymore because he didn't have the motivation as strong as when he was poor. Um, I believe Steve Jobs also said something like, uh, "Stay hungry and stay foolish," and that is correct in some senses. And I totally agree with that. Human beings should never be fully satisfied. Um, and this is also where I completely agree with Islam, especially with their idea of Ramadan. Um, to deliberately um, put you in a temporary starving situation for a while um, in order to be grateful, in order to not forget grace from God. Um, and this also has something to do with the academic topic I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about the ancient Chinese perspective on economy. Um, China was known for its highly developed economy in history, especially in Tang Dynasty and also in Song, in Ming. Um, but what will surprise you is that the traditional Chinese Confucius thinking refused to let the economy grow too high. Um, it always want to set a limit for economy. Because Confucius' mind believes that if the economy goes too high, develops too high, um, culture will go down. Culture will stop developing. And when culture stops developing, morality also stops developing. And at certain points, the society will reach a depravity, a moral decline. And it will eventually leads to the decline of the whole society, of the whole country. Um, so the idea is you must keep a balance between culture, um, in the sense of culture that bears Chinese Confucius morality. You must keep a balance between culture and economy. I actually read from a Chinese historian's work, and he says the Roman Empire collapses because its economy develops too strong and too high, excessively high, and its culture was falling behind. and that led to a universal depravity, moral depravity, and that's the inner cause of the collapse of Roman Empire. Besides the reason of excessive military expansion and invasion of northern Germanic barbarians, etc. Um, Another problem for when the economy goes too high is that it frequently happens that the gap between poor and rich also become so big as the economy grow too much. Because when the gap between poor and rich becomes too high, that's precisely where the suppression and injustice happens. That's also why Chinese culture has a famous Confucius saying, 不患寡而患不均，不患贫而患不安. Which means that we do not fear the amount, the total amount of economy is not too big. We only fear that the wealth is distributed not in a fair way. We do not fear poverty, but we do fear the society is not in harmony. So ancient Chinese politics always set a limit on the development of economy to deliberately not let the economy reach too high to the extent that it's out of control. It also likes to set a limit for both rich men and poor men. It set a limit for rich people to prevent them from being excessively luxury, and also to set a limit for poor people to help them to make sure that they reach the lowest standard to survive, more than survive actually, to let them enjoy life, not in a luxury way, but in a very perceivable, grass-rooted way. That's one of the reasons why you see Chinese food culture is highly developed. You only need to spend very little money to buy or to make very delicious food, because this is one thing that guarantees that even poor Chinese people can enjoy life. And there are also many other cultural activities. It's also part of this social enjoyment. And it's also part of the idea that the ordinary people, that even poor people's life should be lived in an enjoyable way. Chinese Confucius culture believes that the morality is a fundamental thing and wealth is the last thing. Here comes a funny thing. In traditional European society, there's a aristocracy class and there's a serf class, and in modern West there's a class of bourgeois and a class of proletariat. To put it in a simple way, there's always a class who own things, and there's always class who don't own anything, or own very limited amount of things. But in ancient Chinese society, the ordinary people, the farmers, were the bourgeois, were the class of ownership. That's because of the policy of distribution and redistribution of lands in China, that all the ordinary farmers can own lands. But the Confucius intellectuals were the proletariat class, actually, because when they take the national exam, when they become officials in the government, they stop being farmers anymore, and they abandoned their land, and their only job was to serve the government. Um, they do receive salaries from the government, sometimes very high, but sometimes not necessarily high. It depends on the position, etc. Um, but when they stop doing agricultural work in the land, um, they lose their land, or they sold their land. Um, and in certain sense, they become proletariat, or they stop being bourgeois. And Chinese laws also forbid governmental officials to do any commercial business, to own any enterprises, etc. Um, so they cannot become bourgeois in any forms. When I talk about Chinese Confucius intellectuals as an occupation, um, which in Chinese 是 I mean Chinese Confucius intellectuals not only being employed by the government, but also who were in the process of taking exam, or not taking exams at all, but choose to stay at home reading Confucius books and being intellectuals, and being a teacher, teaching Confucius stuff somewhere, etc. And all these people were considered as 士, and this occupation 士, the Confucius intellectuals, are very important, are the keys to maintain the morality of a society. Their role is somehow comparable to Western Christians in history, but their function is completely different, even opposite, because Christians deal with stuff that is beyond this world, that is beyond politics. But the Confucius intellectuals, 士, their job is precisely to take care of politics, to very vehemently participate in politics, in all kind of forms. They are pretty much like Socrates in ancient Greece. When they successfully obtain a position in the government, they just do politics officially. But when they are not in the government, they are just in society, in their own houses. They just teach around and express their opinions and go around and talk to many people, and even write articles and let others see. And so it's pretty much like Socrates, actually. So a Confucius intellectual 士 can be very poor, but is nonetheless highly respected, and even most respected by people in society. This is another example of how ancient Chinese society was a classless society. There was no social class in a society, but only level of qualities. Level of qualities. This is a particular Chinese term. In Chinese, 流品, 流品. In ancient China, if you were rich, so what? If you are a rich businessman doing commercials, nobody respects you. People don't respect you. Chinese laws officially show contempt and many restrictions on commercial businessmen, no matter how rich you are. In a class society like in the West, a higher class means absolutely superior. to the inferior, lower class. If you are bourgeois class, if you are a landlord, oligarchs, aristocracy, it means you are superior to those who are below you in any senses, and you are the most respected and most honored, and you can do all the dishonored things to people who are below your class. And this is how a class society works. But in a classless society like ancient China, all the occupations were equal, but the commercial businessman's occupation was somehow deliberately disrespected slightly. And how much a person is respected in a society is dependent on Liu Ping, level of qualities or level of merits. Now I want to talk more about ancient Chinese perspectives on land and wealth. And in the famous Chinese Confucius classics 4 books, there's one book called 大学, and in 大学 there's a famous passage, and it says, 有德此有人，有人此有土，有土此有财，有财此有用. It means you must have morality first in order to have human being. Since you have human being, you will have land. Since you have land, you will have wealth. Since you have wealth, you will have use. It means only humans with moralities are humans. Only humans with morality can deal with land in a proper way. And when this happens, you will have wealth. You will create wealth. And in the end of the day, all this wealth must be used for something. And it eventually somehow returns to all people. And if you look carefully at this order, it shows you what I mentioned in the beginning of this video, that morality is the first and wealth is the last. And if you look at the modern West, it's precisely the opposite. They monopolize and manipulate all the land in the first place and become rentier class. And then all the ordinary people become slaves to this land, have to pay very high rent to the land in order to survive. And then this rentier class can just use these people like puppies, like slaves, like whatever, whatever stuff, but not human being, and to serve the use that is not for people, to serve to, for example, to hire them to do very stupid activities, or to send them to war, etc. And in this process, because this rentier class themselves do not have any moralities, they also make all people lose their moralities. If you compare the ancient China with the West, I wouldn't say China was a utopian, but the West has definitely been a dystopian. In the end of this video, now I want to talk a bit about how Chinese economic system evolved in history. I will just give one example. In the feudal dynasty of China, which was Zhou, 3,000 years ago. Um, there was a feudal system in which the land were distributed to oligarchs, and oligarchs make all the lands into squares, and each square consists of 9 squares, and every small square was 100 mu, and the central square was called the public square, which means the 8 farmers around have had to work collectively, and the outcomes of this land went to landlord, to the oligarchs, but the 8 squares around the central square were called private land, and the farmers can harvest their own growings from those lands. This is something that I have already talked about in details in my first video. What is China's political philosophy, actually. But what I want to talk more today is how this system evolves into the next system. In other words, how this feudal system disappears and evolves into something else. The central land is called the public land, and all the 8 farmers around grow things together in this central land, and stuff goes to the landlord. But the farmers, they know this is public land, so they are not so hardworking. They are not so hardworking as they are in their own lands. So later it becomes a fact that of the things growing in this public land, it is always fewer and worse than those growings in the private lands. And the landlords, the oligarchs, also find it very disturbing, and they find it difficult to convince the farmers to spend more time in the public land and spend less time in their private lands. This is almost impossible. This is almost as impossible as communism. So what happens in history was, day by day, eventually the farmers made a deal with the landlord, or the landlord made a deal with the farmers. The deal was, okay, now there's no public land anymore. All the square lands is divided into 8 squares now. So all the small lands are your private land now. There's no public land anymore, but you have to pay me tax. You have to pay me tax. The tax was 1/10 of each farmer's outcomes. When this thing happens, the oligarchs get more outcomes than they previously did. But the problem is the feudal system was replaced by something completely different, because the landlords, the oligarchs, only care about the taxes they get, the outcomes they get now. They don't care about which land belongs to whom anymore. So people start to trade lands. Private lands were originally intended to be private use of land, private rights of use. But now it becomes private ownership. And this is something unimaginable in the West because this was a peaceful process in China, a natural peaceful process in China. The land just go from the oligarchs to the hands of the farmers. There's no revolution, no struggle, no bloodshed. This just naturally happened, and everyone just agreed. This is incredible. If you understand this phenomena, you understand China. If you don't understand this historical phenomenon, you would never understand China. So when we talk about the first dynasty of China, that is with the one unified central government, we always talk about how Qing dynasty, how great it is, how unbelievable things it built for China that completely replaced the feudal system. Or other systems that makes the Chinese civilization so unique. We tend to forget the social economic activities that were already taking place in China at the time, much longer before Qing dynasty. Rome was not built in one day, and Chinese civilization was also not built in one day. And the problem of economy and geopolitics in our time also doesn't happen in one day. The West never learned from history. They made World War One, World War Two, and now they create World War Three. Or maybe they do learn from history. And what they learned is history is just a circle of perishment. They have ancient Greek mythologies there. There's a mythology of Sisyphus, in which Sisyphus keep pushing a stone and rolling it to the top of a mountain, and the stone falls down, and then he keeps pushing it again, and to the top, and then it falls down again and again. So somehow the West believe in the circle of perishment. So when they keep doing bad things and eventually fuck up everything, they believe this is a must, this is necessary, this is natural, and they just want to destroy everything. They think, yes, here comes to an end. We must destroy everything. We want to exterminate all human beings or something like that. But Chinese culture believe in the circle of building a civilization. Chinese culture knows very well, no matter how intelligent, how moral we are, everything we build will be fucked up and ruined by the savages, barbarians, in the end of the day anyway. But after that, we still have to build our civilization. And this is the circle of civilization, or the circle of dynasty, so to speak. The dynasty we live in now is called American Dynasty, and it's already near end. And after World War III, the next dynasty on our planet will be a Chinese dynasty. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.